tell us a little bit about your history here in Oskaloosa, and then we'll just start there.
History in Oskaloosa. I've lived in the community a little over 10 years. I work with Musco Sports Lighting. I've been with the company a little over 20 years. The first 10 were in Muscatine, and then relocated over here in 2007. Have a wife, Julie, I've been married to about 29 years. Son Ryan, junior at the Oskaloosa High School.
All right, and you have been a city council member for how long?
Just completed my second term, so for 8 years, and then running for my third term here.
Okay. And there's been quite a bit of talk about the different projects that you guys have undertaken during that. And we'll start with one of the ones that's gotten the most attention, codes. Codes in Oskaloosa. Do you believe that codes in Oskaloosa are helping or hindering growth as far as the city goes, and then how will you address them in your next term since you're running unopposed?
Codes came up in the debate or the forum that we had. Seemed like it was a big deal for the two new candidates running in the at-large. From my perspective, we certainly have an opportunity to look at the codes. If there's codes that, specific codes that people feel are hindering growth, then we need to address those. For all the things we've been tackling the last 8 years, I've not felt like codes it's not been brought to my attention that codes are one of our biggest issues. Certainly want to understand better how people feel they are or are not hindering growth, but quite honestly, I haven't seen those as a huge issue of the things that we're having to deal with. Certainly have not been approached by anybody that has made that a significant issue. So I really would want to understand that better. It's not that there haven't been codes that we want to address. We certainly have tried to deal with some of those, but I won't say that there hasn't been any issues there, but of the real issues we've been trying to tackle, I haven't seen them being this huge impediment to growth by any means.
And one of those big issues that you guys are tackling is early childhood development and that recreation center.
Yes.
It's on the cusp of making whatever it's going to be in Oskaloosa. So for you, why is that important? Why is that particular kind of center important? And then how do you see the city being a part of that, and then also with that, the financial responsibility that might come with that?
Well, as a city, we certainly were involved because we passed as a city passed the 1 cent sales tax, of which 75% of that was dedicated to the center, 25% going to roads and infrastructure. So we were initially involved there. From a overall city perspective, I think education in our communities is critical as we look to retain people in the community, as employers want to try and grow in the community. Having an education system is always something that everybody looks at, whether they're staying in the community or whether they want to come to the community. And early childhood education, there's a multitude of studies out there that talks about if a child gets an early start, they stay ahead. Conversely, if they don't get that early childhood development, they never catch up. So that's a critical piece. Certainly, the recreation community or recreation center. It's a big part of what a community offers. Again, if we're going to be a growing community, if we're going to be able to attract and retain people, whether it's for existing employers or a new employer, we've got to offer those amenities. So I see them hand in hand being a critical part of our community growth.
And you've been supportive of the regional airport since its early stages.
Yes, sir.
Why is that important for you to support that project, and how do you see that being a key part of Oskaloosa in the future?
Again, I think a key part of the name of that's regional airport. And as we look at this region, and you can define the region a variety of different ways, whether it's the surrounding counties, surrounding communities. If we're going to continue to grow, if we're going to be a community that, or a region that attracts and retains good business here, air travel, any type of travel, whether it's good roads, again, looking at the bypass, Northwest bypass, air travel, whatever it might be. We've got to have that in our region if we're going to grow in the future. We don't have what we need for the communities in the area right now.
In these last two projects, there's been some contention that's taken place with those, and there's been a little, not a little, but quite a bit of talk about the division that has seemed to appear between rural and city folks, and the two types of government. How do you see yourself and your role addressing that and maybe helping bridge that gap or heal those wounds?
Great question. I'd love to be able to sit here and tell you that I had a magic wand to say that we could do something to get us working together. I think it's imperative that we figure that out. We can't have the county government going in a different direction than the city government, particularly when this city is the county seat. But communication is always the core to any of this, and or anything like this. So we have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to debate our differences professionally and ethically. It's a challenge, and I don't have an answer. I wouldn't begin to state that I do, but certainly I'm prepared to work on it. Respect what they need to accomplish from the county side, but we're going to have to figure out a way to work together, because whether it's these two projects or any major projects that we need to work on going forward, we can't be going in different directions.
And those are long-term vision kinds of projects that we're starting to see. The end result bypass is one of those, the airport, even the childhood rec center is a long-term.
Mm-hmm.
For you yourself, as well, we'll assume as an incoming council member, what are your long-term visions for Oskaloosa? What would you like to see? I mean, there's these projects that are now bubbling to the top, but is there something underneath that you would like to see get started?
As I mentioned in the forum that we had, my view for the next 4 years is to stay the course of what we've worked on. We've been doing a lot of good things for the city, but we have some real needs. We have infrastructure needs, whether it's on top of the dirt with the roads or underneath with our utilities. They're not the glamorous projects like I would call a fire station or the early childhood development center. Those are neat projects that everybody can see, but the core of the city that has, we have to have great infrastructure, and so we've got some real needs coming with regard to our sewer system. It's going to be some big dollars, and so I guess my goal being, as we address those, that we do them in a fiscally responsible manner. We have to deal with them. We're an aging community with regard to our infrastructure, and so we need to have a blend of the neat visionary projects like we've talked about, but we also need to stay focused on what it takes to get our infrastructure back up to where it needs to be, and do it in a fiscally responsible way. It's a matter of priorities. We're going to have more needs than we have available dollars, so how can we work at spending those dollars wisely, prioritizing wisely, and accomplish what we need for the citizens of Oskaloosa?
And citizens often judge their councils by the potholes they hit. So, how do you guys continue to address that problem? I mean, you ran, many council members 8 years ago ran on roads and those kinds of things, and we'll go on further here after a bit with the sewer. But for roads right now, where do you see that continuing, or you have new plans in place for roads?
I think we have a good plan in place. We did an analysis. We utilized Iowa State to prioritize the roads. Now that was done some years ago, but it built that plan. I think we need to take a fresh look at it and make sure that it's still got the appropriate priorities, which in essence we do every year when we do our budgeting. We do our CIP planning. We try and look out 5 years, but there certainly is things that could change. There could be a development that goes on in an area proposed. There could be a deterioration, a different rate that was planned. So we need to continuously be looking at it, but I think that plan's pretty solid, and we just need to continue to work that plan that we have.
And community members have voiced their concern about sewer rates, water rates. As a council member, why was that necessary to do, and how do you see the council handling that in the future, because there are a bunch of mandates that have come down from the DNR, so.
Yeah, we've certainly got to fit within the regulations of the DNR and the state puts on us. We also just have to maintain those systems, even if they're not new mandates. Any system of that magnitude needs to be maintained, and so rates have to cover those. And you can certainly bond for them, but you still got to pay for the bonds with rates. And we don't want to make decisions that aren't fiscally responsible, but at the same token, we do have to take care of the system. We have to hit those mandates, and whether that's a new plant that we've been considering based upon our permit requirements, or just addressing inflow and infiltration, which we've been doing this past year. Again, that's an aging system. Manholes were deteriorating, lines were deteriorating, so there's some of that's below surface. It's not hitting a pothole, but without a good sewer system, I'm sure we would have some complaints even bigger than maybe hitting a pothole.
I was gonna say, you guys have now kind of taken the approach of where you're doing the infrastructure and the roads at the same time.
Yes.
Do you see more of that continuing then into the future?
I think that's just good fiscal, planning. I mean, if you're going to be tearing up a road and there's utilities underneath it, particularly utilities that would need some level of maintenance within the near future, it'd be silly to put the road down and then come back and tear it up 2 or 3 years later. So that's part of that whole prioritization system. You look at it in conjunction and what makes sense. And yes, I think that certainly needs to go hand in hand.
And people want to see their cities grow. They want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Are there things that you can do or help steer the council, because you've been pro tem for a little while on the council?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that you can do to help bring some more of that economic development to Oskaloosa?
I look at the council's responsibility as being supportive of the initiatives that feed into it. I talked about the Early Childhood Development Center. Education's a critical part. Having our infrastructure and our roads as we bring people in and trying to attract them. I don't necessarily see the council or the city being out doing the recruitment. We need to be supporting our other branches within the city, whether it's the council or the development groups. Where we can be helpful is if there's infrastructure needed to be ready. That's something as a council we need to support, getting a development area with the utilities in place. So we need to be working with those groups. We need to be supporting them. We need to be supporting projects that's good for our community. I don't see the council's responsibility as being the leading group out there doing the recruitment. And I'm a strong believer that you need to tend to your garden, meaning there's a much better chance with the existing businesses we have here that we could grow them by 100 new jobs than we could go out and find a new employer to come to town with 100 new jobs. So it's a combination of both, but I also don't want to get so focused on recruitment that we forget about retention and growth of our existing businesses, because I think that's, for a community in Midwest or in Iowa that have some very good businesses in town, we need to make sure we're supporting them, because I would say that's a higher likelihood for our growth than maybe going out and finding that next big business to come to town.
That you would like to address that maybe I haven't addressed yet so far?
I don't know if there's anything specific. Again, as I've stated, I think we have a real responsibility to continue to be fiscally responsible. I mean, there's more projects, there's more needs than we have tax dollars available to do them all. So I think as a council, our biggest priority or our biggest objective needs to be prioritization of those projects, because we do have a lot of needs in an aging community with aging infrastructure, because we want to balance taking care of that as well as doing the neat projects like a recreation center and the things that people can really see that are visible, I guess.
Well, and this would be the point in the show where I typically would ask the candidate, well, why should people vote for you? But there's you and a write-in column. So, I mean, even if you would like to address people, maybe you'd like to share why it's important to vote or why you think that this election is important.
Well, I think it's important always to vote. We need to exercise that that privilege that we've been given. I think maybe it's a little bit corny, but if you want the right to complain, you better vote. You know, I certainly would like to see people show up and vote. Diane Otteson, who's running the First Ward, she made the comment that even though she's running unopposed, the votes show a sign of confidence. So I would certainly like anybody that that comes to the polls to show their support. You know, that hopefully the things we've been doing the last 8 years are gives us the confidence, or gives me the confidence to continue doing it for another 4 years. So I'd like everybody to vote, and I certainly would like to see them check my name on the ballot.